in the heart of upscale Atlanta, Georgia, a city known for its affluence and thriving black elite, a chilling discovery shatters the image of success and luxury. Marcus Lawson, a well-respected businessman with a reputation for power and influence, is found dead in his Tesla outside his lavish, gated home. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, but instead, it becomes the scene of a mystery that no one could have predicted. Initially, investigators suspect a robbery gone wrong. After all, Marcus was known to drive a luxury car and lived in an area where crime was not unheard of. But as the investigation unfolds, the details begin to paint a more sinister picture. What appeared to be a random act of violence soon reveals itself as something far darker. A hidden affair, a secret insurance policy worth millions, and a marriage built on lies unravel, leaving questions in their wake. Was Marcus's death the result of a crime of passion? Or was it a cold, calculated murder driven by something far more chilling? The case will take us deep into the world of Atlanta's black elite, where glamour and power mask secrets that no one could have imagined. As the investigation unfolds, the truth will come to light, but it will leave behind a trail of broken relationships, shattered reputations, and the harsh reality of how far some will go to maintain their wealth and status. Stay with us as we uncover the truth behind Marcus Lawson's tragic death. At first glance, Marcus and Denise Lawson seemed to embody the American dream. Marcus, a successful entrepreneur with a thriving business empire, was known for his sharp mind and steady ascent in Atlanta's competitive business world. Denise, his wife of 15 years, was the picture of grace and elegance. As a philanthropist and socialite, she was admired for her commitment to giving back, frequently seen at high-profile events and charity galas alongside her husband. Together, they were a power couple, envied by many for their wealth, their influence, and their apparent perfect marriage. They lived in a sprawling, gated mansion on the outskirts of Atlanta, surrounded by lush landscaping and the kind of luxury that most only dream of. The couple had 2 children, and their family life, outwardly, seemed to be a model of success and happiness. To the outside world, they had it all: an enviable lifestyle, the finest things money could buy, and a reputation that many would kill to possess. Yet, beneath the gleaming surface of their perfect life, something was not right. As the investigation into Marcus's death began to unfold, it quickly became clear that the Lawsons' seemingly flawless world had been built on a foundation of secrecy, lies, and betrayal. Join us as we uncover the hidden truths behind the facade of Atlanta's black elite and explore the twists and turns of a case that will reveal the shocking reality of what happens when greed, power, and deception collide. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to Beyond the Evidence. Stay with us for more deep dives into true crime stories that uncover the truth behind the headlines. To those who knew them, Marcus and Denise Lawson's marriage appeared to be the epitome of success. They were the face of power in Atlanta's elite circles, a couple that seemed to have it all: wealth, prestige, and a reputation built on years of hard work and philanthropy. Yet, beneath the surface of this picture-perfect partnership, The complexities of their personal lives were far more tangled than anyone could have imagined. Marcus, a driven businessman, was deeply committed to his work. His company, a thriving tech firm, had brought him immense wealth and respect. But as his business flourished, so did the pressure to maintain that success. He worked long hours, often at the expense of his family life, leaving Denise to manage the home front and their 2 children. For Marcus, the ambition that had driven him to the top was both a source of pride and a point of contention in his relationship. His focus on work often created a distance between him and Denise, leaving her to handle not only the family, but also the pressures that came with being the wife of a high-profile businessman. Denise, on the other hand, had her own ambitions. While she was known for her philanthropic endeavors, there was a side to her that craved more. She had a deep desire for recognition and the kind of power that came with Marcus's success. But despite the public persona she cultivated, her relationship with Marcus was not as secure as it appeared. Beneath her polished exterior, there was a simmering frustration, an unspoken tension that had been building for years. Marcus's increasing distance, both emotionally and physically, left Denise feeling isolated and unfulfilled. In the background, there were whispers of Marcus's behavior. He was known to be a workaholic, sometimes cold and distant, but there were other, more troubling rumors about his personal life. Close friends of Marcus's reported that he had recently begun to show signs of stress and dissatisfaction, not just with his work, but with his marriage. These strains would eventually come to a head, but at the time, they were masked by public appearances and their shared commitment to their family's image. On the surface, their marriage was solid, a partnership built on mutual respect and love. But the cracks were already starting to show, cracks that no one saw until it was too late. Both Marcus and Denise were locked in a dance of unspoken dissatisfaction, each yearning for something that the other could not, or would not, provide. As the investigation into Marcus's death began, it became clear that the complexities of their relationship were at the heart of the mystery. It wasn't just a case of a marriage falling apart. It was a case of betrayal, of unmet desires, and of secrets that had been kept for far too long. The more investigators uncovered, the clearer it became that Marcus and Denise's relationship was far from what it seemed. The night Marcus Lawson was found dead in his Tesla, the initial assumption was that he had been the victim of a botched robbery. The high-end vehicle, the gated community, and Marcus's stature all seemed to align with the typical profile of a crime of opportunity gone wrong. But something didn't add up. Investigators quickly noted that the scene lacked many of the usual signs of a robbery. There were no signs of forced entry or theft, and the car itself was left undisturbed. The more they examined the evidence, the more it seemed that Marcus's death was not the random act of violence it first appeared to be. As the investigation unfolded, small but telling signs began to surface. Denise, despite being the grieving widow, was acting erratically. Her emotions seemed to swing between grief and cold indifference, with moments where she appeared more focused on maintaining appearances than mourning her husband's sudden death. Her behavior was puzzling to those around her, especially her closest friends, who began to question if the tragedy was as straightforward as it seemed. Moreover, there were whispers about Marcus's recent struggles. Friends and colleagues reported that he had been increasingly tense in the weeks leading up to his death. The pressures of his business were mounting, but some also suggested that he had been privately dealing with issues in his marriage, issues that Marcus had kept hidden from the public eye. In the days before his death, he had even begun to distance himself from his usual social circles, a behavior that was both uncharacteristic and concerning to those who knew him best. And then there were the oddities that came to light in the aftermath of his death. While investigators were focused on the potential for a robbery, it was a life insurance policy that would prove to be the key to unlocking the mystery. Denise, it seemed, had been the beneficiary of a policy worth millions of dollars, an amount far higher than would be expected for a man of Marcus's standing. The timing of the policy, taken out just months before his death, was also suspiciously coincidental. A policy of such magnitude, combined with the other strange details, began to paint a much darker picture. It became clear that the seeds of Marcus's murder were sown long before that fateful night. Early warning signs, from Denise's unsettling behavior to the troubling financial decisions, had been ignored or overlooked. But now, in the wake of his death, they would come to define the investigation, slowly unraveling the carefully constructed image of the Lawson family and revealing the hidden truths behind the murder. As investigators dug deeper into Marcus Lawson's life, the case that had initially seemed to be a random act of violence began to take on a much darker and more calculated nature. The surface-level evidence, the mysterious death of a wealthy businessman, was merely the tip of the iceberg. The more they uncovered, the more it became clear that this was not a crime of opportunity, but a meticulously planned murder driven by motives rooted in betrayal, greed, and ambition. The turning point in the investigation came when law enforcement uncovered details about Marcus's life insurance policy. While it was common for high-net-worth individuals to have sizable policies, Marcus's was shockingly large, a multi-million-dollar policy that Denise stood to inherit. What was even more troubling was the timing of the policy. It had been taken out just months before his death. This revelation raised immediate red flags. Could his death have been part of a calculated plan, an act carried out with the knowledge that his wife would stand to gain everything if he were gone? But this was not the only disturbing discovery. Investigators soon uncovered evidence of a secret affair that Marcus had been having with another woman. The affair, which had been ongoing for months, added a new layer of complexity to the case. Denise, already under scrutiny for her behavior following Marcus's death, was now faced with the possibility that her husband had been unfaithful. But as more details emerged, the affair appeared to be just a small piece of the puzzle. What became clear was that the financial pressures on Marcus were mounting. Despite his success, his business was facing difficulties, and his personal life seemed to be unraveling. His growing dissatisfaction with his marriage had become more evident in the weeks leading up to his death. Meanwhile, Denise, who had always been seen as the graceful and supportive wife, was now at the center of the investigation. Her apparent indifference to her husband's death, coupled with the discovery of the life insurance policy, led investigators to examine her every move more closely. Denise had been the one to alert authorities to the scene of the crime, but as investigators reviewed her statements, they began to find inconsistencies. Her account of events didn't align with the physical evidence at the crime scene. Further scrutiny revealed that she had been in contact with Marcus just before his death, not to offer support, but to discuss business matters related to his finances. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together in ways that no one had anticipated. The affair, the life insurance policy, the financial troubles, they all pointed to a singular motive: money. But the question remained: how far would Denise go to secure her future? Investigators soon realized that what they were dealing with wasn't just a case of a wife seeking revenge for a husband's infidelity. It was a case of someone willing to kill for financial security and to cover up years of deception. As the investigation intensified, so too did the stakes. Denise, once thought to be a grieving widow, was now the prime suspect. But there were still unanswered questions. Who else was involved in Marcus's death? Was it just Denise pulling the strings, or was there someone else who had a hand in the murder? The more the investigation revealed, the more it became clear that Marcus Lawson's murder was a carefully orchestrated crime, with each decision made in pursuit of one thing: money. The investigation had crossed the point of no return. As the layers of deception continued to peel away, the case moved from suspicion to outright conviction. Marcus's death was no longer just a tragedy. It was a crime that had been planned, executed, and covered up with chilling precision. In the days following Marcus Lawson's death, the immediate aftermath was one of shock and disbelief. Atlanta's social circles, which had once looked up to the Lawsons as the epitome of success, were now shaken to their core. Marcus's tragic death sent ripples through the tight-knit community of wealthy entrepreneurs and socialites, leaving many questioning the true nature of the man they thought they knew. Friends, colleagues, and family members were left to navigate a maze of emotions: grief, confusion, and growing suspicion. What had really happened to Marcus Lawson? For those closest to Marcus, the news of his death was devastating. His colleagues at work, many of whom had admired his business acumen, were left reeling from the loss. But their mourning quickly turned into concern as details of the case began to emerge. At first, they, too, had believed that Marcus had been the victim of a random act of violence. But as investigators began to piece together the evidence, doubts started to creep in. His colleagues were among the first to question the circumstances surrounding his death. How could someone so successful and well-respected end up murdered in a robbery that didn't seem to make sense? Meanwhile, Denise, the woman at the center of it all, was dealing with the fallout in her own way. Publicly, she maintained the appearance of a grieving widow, often seen in private with close friends, crying over the loss of her husband. But privately, her behavior raised red flags. There were moments of cold indifference, moments when her actions seemed disconnected from the mourning process. While her public statements appeared genuine, those who had known her for years began to feel a sense of unease. How could a woman who had just lost her husband, so suddenly exhibit such a lack of emotion? Even more troubling, her focus seemed to remain on preserving her family's image and protecting her own interests rather than mourning Marcus's death. The media, too, played a pivotal role in shaping the public's perception of the case. Sensational headlines began to surface, focusing on the lavish lifestyle that Marcus and Denise had enjoyed. They painted a picture of a marriage fraught with tension and suspicion, suggesting that the motive for Marcus's death was more than just financial. Rumors of an affair and questions about Denise's behavior intensified. The public began to speculate whether Denise was more involved in the crime than she had initially let on. The investigators, aware of the mounting suspicions, began to sharpen their focus on Denise. While she was the primary suspect, they knew they needed more evidence to bring a case against her. The inconsistencies in her statements, her questionable behavior in the days following Marcus's death, and the discovery of the life insurance policy all pointed to her involvement. But the case was still far from closed. In the meantime, the reactions of those closest to Marcus and Denise, their shock and growing doubt, added another layer of complexity to the investigation. Was Denise truly the grieving widow, or was she playing a role in a much darker story? As the days turned into weeks, the tension surrounding the case only grew. Denise's public persona continued to crumble as more details of her life and marriage to Marcus came to light. Her once perfect image began to dissolve in the face of mounting evidence. The tragedy of Marcus's death had become more than just a personal loss. It had become a public spectacle, and the reactions of those involved were shaping the course of the investigation. As the investigation into Marcus Lawson's death deepened, the cracks in the once perfect facade of his life began to widen, exposing the truth that had long been hidden behind closed doors. What initially seemed like a simple case of a robbery gone wrong was now clearly a meticulously planned murder. The more detectives uncovered, the more they realized that the answers were all hidden in plain sight, if only they knew where to look. The breakthrough came when investigators turned their attention to the life insurance policy that Marcus had taken out just months before his death. The policy, worth millions, named Denise as the sole beneficiary. At first, this seemed like an unfortunate coincidence, but as they dug deeper, the timing became even more suspicious. The policy was remarkably large for someone of Marcus's status, and the quickness with which it had been drawn up raised questions. Denise, who had portrayed herself as a grieving widow, had a clear financial motive. She stood to gain everything from Marcus's death. But did that motive extend to murder? The investigators had their suspicions, but they needed more. As they continued their investigation, it became clear that the relationship between Marcus and Denise was far from the idealized version they had presented to the public. Through interviews with friends, colleagues, and business associates, investigators uncovered a pattern of tension between the couple in the months leading up to Marcus's death. While the public believed they were living a dream life, the reality was far more complicated. Marcus had been increasingly distant, both emotionally and physically. Friends of the couple began to recall how he had been seen meeting with a woman on several occasions. This woman was later confirmed to be his mistress, adding another layer to the growing web of lies and betrayal. The affair, coupled with the mounting financial pressures Marcus was facing, painted a picture of a man who was perhaps seeking a way out of a marriage that was slowly suffocating him. But what about Denise? What role did she play in this tangled narrative? Investigators soon discovered something that would shake the case to its core. Phone records revealed that Denise had been in contact with Marcus on the night of his death, just hours before he was found in his Tesla. But her calls were not to discuss their marriage or the grief over his impending death. Instead, they had been centered around business and financial matters that were crucial to Denise's personal financial future. The pieces were falling into place, but there was one more critical detail to uncover: the involvement of another person. As the investigation continued, surveillance footage surfaced that placed Denise at the scene of Marcus's death long before the police were called. Further investigation revealed that she had been in contact with a man, someone close to her, though not a direct family member, just days before Marcus was killed. It was becoming increasingly clear that this murder was not a solo operation, but rather one that involved careful planning, manipulation, and possibly even collusion. As investigators pieced together the timeline of events, they discovered that Denise had been planning Marcus's murder for months. Her financial troubles, combined with her desire for independence and the enormous insurance payout, had driven her to a dark decision. The affair, her involvement in business dealings, and her manipulation of Marcus's finances all pointed to a woman who was willing to do anything to secure her future, even if it meant taking her husband's life. Denise had played her role perfectly, maintaining the public image of a perfect wife while secretly setting the stage for Marcus's demise. The final revelation came when investigators were able to trace the gun used in the murder. It was purchased by someone close to Denise, a detail that tied the crime directly to her. When confronted with the evidence, Denise was arrested, her carefully constructed world of lies and deception finally coming crashing down. She had orchestrated the murder of her husband for money, but in doing so, she had revealed the depths of her own darkness. In the end, Marcus's murder was not just the tragic result of a failed marriage or financial strain. It was the culmination of months of planning, manipulation, and deceit. Denise had coldly orchestrated the murder of the man she once loved, driven by a combination of greed, desire, and a thirst for power. The investigation had uncovered the truth, but it had also exposed a deeper, darker side of human nature, one that was willing to sacrifice everything, including a life, in order to achieve personal gain. Denise Lawson's arrest marked the final, shocking twist in a case that had captivated Atlanta's elite. Once seen as the perfect wife and the face of a glamorous marriage, she now stood as the prime architect of her husband's brutal murder. Her calculated decision to take Marcus's life for the promise of wealth had shattered the lives of everyone around her. Marcus's friends, family, and colleagues were left to pick up the pieces of a life that had been taken too soon, one that had seemed so perfect on the outside, but had been deeply flawed on the inside. The immediate aftermath of Denise's arrest rippled through the community. What had been a tragic loss for Marcus's family was now a public spectacle, with the investigation revealing the layers of manipulation and deceit that had been hidden for so long. Denise's motives, greed, financial strain, and personal ambition had driven her to a dark and irreversible decision. The community, which had once admired the Lawsons, now found itself grappling with the horror of how far one person could go for money and power. For Marcus's family, the loss was compounded by the betrayal. His children were left without a father, their sense of security upended by the actions of the woman who had promised to protect them. Marcus's business associates and friends, who had respected him for his intellect and hard work, now questioned everything they had believed about him. The perfect life they had once envied was revealed to be nothing more than a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest push. The case also left a deep reflection on the nature of deception and the lengths to which people will go when their personal desires outweigh their morals. Denise's actions served as a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that the pursuit of power and wealth can sometimes blind people to the consequences of their choices. Marcus's death, though tragic, became a lesson in the dangers of unchecked ambition and the toxic power of greed. As Denise faced the consequences of her actions, the city of Atlanta was left to reflect on the moral cost of her decisions. In the end, Marcus Lawson's death was not just a loss of a life, but the unraveling of a carefully constructed illusion. His murder had exposed the hidden truths behind the Lawsons' marriage and the darkness that can lurk behind even the most polished exteriors.